I'm Haley B. Miller, and this is Ohio Politics Explained, a podcast where you give us 15 minutes and we give you all the news you need to sound smart and impress your friends. Welcome back to Ohio Politics Explained. Today, we're talking all about Les Wexner, the Ohio retail billionaire who spent years tied to child sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Wexner testified before Congress this week as he faces questions over what he did or didn't know about Epstein's crimes. Making his Oak debut today is Columbus Dispatch investigative reporter Max Philby, who's been writing all about Wexner these days. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start with a primer for folks who haven't been following this closely. Who is Les Wexner, and how did he become acquainted with Epstein?
Yeah, so Les Wexner is the richest man in Ohio. He is the founder of L Brands, which is a retail empire, or rather was a retail empire, that included companies like Victoria's Secret, Bath and Body Works, at another time, The Limited, and even Abercrombie and Fitch. The company has since been broken apart, and he stepped down from that role in 2020. Wexner had employed Epstein as his family's more or less personal financial advisor from the late 80s through around 2007. So that's how these two men knew each other.
Yeah, they were business partners for a long time. Epstein was involved in the New Albany Company, which transformed that area into one of Columbus's wealthiest suburbs. Wexner made Epstein his power of attorney. And Democrats in Congress said Epstein profited from his relationship with Wexner to the tune of $1 billion.
And we should be very clear that there would be no Epstein Island, there would be no Epstein plane, there would be no money to traffic women and girls. Mr. Epstein would not be the wealthy man he was without the support of Les Wexner.
Did Epstein ever abuse the influence he had over Wexner's finances?
So from what we've seen in the documents that the Department of Justice has released in response to the Epstein Files Transparency Act, the Wexner family would say yes. There are multiple instances in those files where an attorney for Wexner or somebody else would say that, Epstein stole or misappropriated millions, if not more than $100 million from the Wexner family. Eventually, according to a DOJ memo in there, we found eventually that Epstein repaid roughly $100 million to the Wexners. But, Les Wexner has long maintained that this theft, which is what he calls it, is sort of what led to the ending of their relationship, which coincidentally happened to be right around the time that Epstein was under investigation the first time around, and he then subsequently ended up, getting convicted of sex crimes back in 2008.
Yeah, and Wexner kind of alluded to this in his testimony to the U.S. House this week, which we'll talk more about in a sec, but he essentially said he was conned by Epstein, right? Yeah,
he, openly admitted in a document that he presented the House Oversight Committee to start his testimony, he openly admitted that he was naive in trusting Epstein, said that he was taken advantage of and conned by him. Again, these two men had a long relationship of almost 20 years. And as you mentioned earlier, Wexner had given Epstein power of attorney. So Epstein really had a lot of control and power in Wexner's world, financially speaking.
Yeah, for sure. Our former colleagues, Mark Williams and Tim Farron, published a great story today looking at Wexner's relationship with Epstein, and their reporting showed that it wasn't all business. Wexner was a pretty shy guy, and Epstein introduced him to all these celebrities, influential people. Has Wexner said much about their personal connection?
So it's interesting, right? Because obviously, like I said, these two men knew each other for roughly 2 decades. And Wexner, I believe, even in his testimony yesterday, his written testimony, even said that Epstein had introduced him to a lot of other important, famous, and wealthy people, and that Wexner was impressed by that, so to speak. We don't know a ton about their personal relationship. Part of the files, one of the files that was released by the DOJ in recent weeks, included what appeared to be a draft letter from Epstein to Wexner. It's unclear whether he ever sent this letter to Wexner. But he heavily implied through there that the two shared secrets together. that they had been close for 15 years plus, and that they each owed each other a great debt. So from all accounts, it looks and sounds like they were particularly close. But we haven't heard a ton from Les Wexner in terms of, how close was that relationship or bond.
Yeah, some of the other things that have interested me in the documents too is, there was a reference at one point that one of Wexner's kids referred to Epstein as Uncle Jeffrey. We've seen photos of Wexner, Epstein, and Wexner's wife Abigail at parties and things like that. Wexner was also part of that infamous birthday book for Epstein and drew kind of a crude photo when he signed that for Epstein. So a lot of interesting communications have come out in those documents. And with all this out there, things have gotten pretty awkward for the Ohio elected officials who received donations from Wexner over the years. And there are a lot of them. Treasurer Robert Sprague, Senator John Husted, and U.S. Reps Mike Carey and Joyce Beatty, among others, have decided to give that money to charity. Meanwhile, as we've alluded to, Congress ordered Wexner to testify about Epstein, which he did this week at his home in New Albany. Only Democrats on the House Oversight Committee traveled to Ohio to ask Wexner questions. What did they want to know, and were they satisfied with what they heard?
Yeah, so House Democrats on the Oversight Committee held a press conference a few hours into the deposition of Wexner yesterday. They said that they were basically trying to get at, what did Wexner know about Epstein and when did he know it? How close were these two men? Frankly, members of the Oversight Committee who held the press conference said that they were not satisfied with Wexner's answers. They said a lot of them bordered on potentially lying even. Said he often said that he couldn't recall specific details and whatnot. So no, I think it sounded like at least partway through the deposition yesterday, they were not satisfied with his answers.
Do we know what happens next? Will Wexner have to testify again? I mean, I assume Congress isn't just going to stop looking into him now.
Yeah, no, I mean, the members of Congress who spoke publicly yesterday, said this is just the beginning of the questions that we're asking him. This is not, the end by any means. I think it's important to note too, aside from the Epstein investigation, Les Wexner has been ordered to testify as part of the Richard Strauss investigation at Ohio State too. There's an ongoing lawsuit there right now. Richard Strauss is a doctor at Ohio State who's accused of abusing, hundreds of former students and athletes there for years. And Wexner had been fighting requests to be deposed in that case. But he lost that battle, and it sounds like he's going to be giving testimony sometime within the next month or two.
Certainly Les Wexner is a name we will be hearing a lot for the foreseeable future. If you want to know more about Wexner, his relationship with Epstein, and what we heard from the deposition this week, head to dispatch.com.